Wow. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Augur meeting on June 9th, 2025. The notes are in the chat if you want to use them or not. It's totally up to you to sign in or whatever. There's a few things on the agenda here. Callie, I think this is probably your set of questions up first.
Yeah. Um, okay. Um, I thought it was worth, especially since we have the meeting today, like having a discussion around like handling deleted repositories. And this is like there's a couple of layers to it because when we have this detect GitHub move core error for people that are not just me and Sean who have talked about this, whenever you see Flower looking at the errors for repositories that, and this is a good example, now have a 404, they've deleted for whatever reason, they are no longer detectable. And it errors because there's no redirection and it resets collection, but that's just continuously looping to reset collection of something that's never going to succeed. And so, how to handle the error, my perspective on this in general just is having some way to like stop collection, or like, oh, you see the 404, this, it takes it out of loop of collection, or it gives a success collected because it's, I mean, however long it's going, there's no more collection to be done on this repository. So in one ways you can think of this as a success and finished, this repository has finished collection. But how do we stop collecting? And then what, and kind of what you had brought up, Sean, in there is like what happens? Like, how do we tell the users? And I guess my proposed, just kind of thinking out a little bit, is okay, what are the two things? How do we stop the collection so it's not continuously airing out and attempting to collect on it every day? Because that's kind of what happens once something is identified that doesn't collect, it errors, and then it gets put to the top of the queue each time that resets. And so you're just continuously trying to collect on something that's not there. And then what do we do to notify a user, if at all? And I guess my proposed solution for that would be to add maybe a column to the repo info table, something along the line of repo source not found being true, repo deleted, whatever the column is, but having a column that distinguishes that a repository in whatever realm it is doesn't exist. And like if you wanted to be super thorough, you could even like schedule some type of thing to like recheck all of the ones that get put as no longer detected to make sure that something that, if you wanted to be very thorough in the long run, that could also be a way of
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we're something
So
like
this
we're
is
yeah.
So
Oh,
this
that's a good
text
idea.
gets this actually is entered in the description field for the repo. It's just that actually we don't show the description field for the repo anywhere. And I think the suggestion of adding some kind of binary indicator that would permanently be ignored by the collection utilities and also um, provide some kind of flag that a front end interface could use to display that the repo no longer exists.
Yeah, that would
Um,
be easily added to like the repo info like portion of 8 knot. It's something that I don't know if we do that for archived repositories. But I think that's kind of falls under. I think it'd be good to be able to put like active archived, or like no longer like located. The exact wording is not coming
yeah.
straight to mind,
Okay.
but some type of that, having that true false makes it super easy to put that into 8 knot under our repo info.
I think archived,
Yeah,
active, and 404
yeah,
are
because
the
then
three.
archived is also another thing that you could then, you no longer, I don't know how like archived repositories are being handled up until this point. But that's another
There
like
is a there is a single field on the repo table called archived, or yeah, I think it's called is archived, and that column is used to indicate when a repo is archived. I'm sorry, it's repo underscore archived. And repo archived date collected is the date that we identified its archival status.
does that remove it from the collection queue or did it stay in the
I don't
collection?
think it does. I think you are right that everything that is still in the database is eventually being recycled so that it checks to, so we're checking to see if the errors are permanent or not periodically. And I think this is a case where it's highly likely the error is permanent.
Hmm.
Um, and it wouldn't need to be checked very often, or it would only need to be checked upon being asked to be checked. And I suppose an example, the one example where it could certainly be the case that we would 404 on a repository that still exists is if GitHub is down while we're
Yeah.
doing that collection. And and a lot of things we do like 10 retries on GitHub. I don't know if we're doing that for these 404s. I suspect we're doing some degree of retry. Um, so yeah,
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. You do a couple of like define a certain number of retries. If that's the case, it goes to 404. Because I think a lot of the errors that I'm seeing right now are just based on it hitting 404s, and the repositories are they do not exist anymore for whatever reason. Because it's like I think that the one thing I would want to make sure to look into is that it seems like the source move stuff is working out well. I don't know if it's like I still haven't been able to check or see if the repo git is being changed, but since that side of it is pretty hardened, I feel more confident about doing this. Is that since we know that it's able to detect the move, it's now all the stuff is based off of the source ID. A lot of the other things that are around this that are needed to be like hardened have.
yeah, have been. Yeah,
Yes.
this, John, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to approach this, but I think the suggestion of a like a collection state at the probably in the Augur operations collection status table, we would need a status that would never get updated. And in the repo table, or in the repo info table, we would need a column that just indicated if it's archived active or 404'd. I don't know if you have
Um,
any thought about that,
yes.
John.
So actually, a couple weeks ago, Andrew and I did talk about this exact issue, actually.
Huh,
And
sweet.
so, and actually, we had the same exact suggestion in terms of descheduling a repo for collection is just to add a status of, um, I think what we called it was stopped, where
Okay.
essentially just sort of the collection would look for that status, and if it sees it, just don't attempt to collect on that repo. Um, and that is actually, we wanted that not necessarily to resolve this issue in particular, but more broadly just to give the administrators of an Augur instance more granularity over what collection is doing. And we actually have a couple different things that we want to do with it. In particular, we want to enable an Augur instance to delete a repo while it is running. So without the need to restart Augur. Um,
That's
and
I will tell you that's logically logical, but I think we need to pause collection of everything else if we're going to delete a repo just because of the database contention issues. Hallie has a
yes,
question.
um, so uh, uh thank you. Yes, that would be wild. What's your question?
Oh, I mean, it's more that on the same exact page, I like the idea of actually having both of these things of like, we have the repo stat flag that makes sense in like the repo info table, archived, active, 404 or stopped. And then you
Mhm.
have in the Augur operations table where it's like, if it's archived or 404, then that would put it as stopped. But for the same thing that you're saying, John, like having as like an administrator the ability to stop indexing a repository, that's something that like Greg and I have talked about, that's actually one of the linked issues that I put here because that's like potentially like the solution for this. So it's on the same page because it's like it would be nice, like the deleting the repositories, as somebody who has spent a lot of my life recently trying to delete repositories, that's a great like, but even just having the ability to stop or being like, I know, I'm like, or I see all the errors of like, I get it, just let me stop, make you stop collecting on it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we've kind of, all four of us have like separately come to the same conclusion. I think it gives a good um, pointer that we're kind of going in the right direction. I think that this handles a lot of administrative headaches.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a goal of ours for a while to have Augur more flexible in terms of this, because the not being able to delete a repo has been a huge sticking point for me in particular for at least a couple of years now. Um, but we do actually have kind of a plan as to how deleting a repo at runtime would work. It would need to be, it couldn't necessarily be something that could immediately happen. It would need to be something that you could schedule. So you would like add a status in the repo table of something like, you know, deletable or needs to be deleted, something along that line, where you'd say, like, not only do we not want to collect this repo, we want to delete this repo. And then you would sort of have a cycle where collection naturally reaches a stopping point, and then instead of just scheduling new repos for collection after that point, collection pauses and then the repo gets deleted when nothing is updating the database from the collection standpoint. And then after the deletion happens, then the collection can start again.
Okay, that makes sense because you're it's pausing. It's just more of a systematic way of doing it, which as like that makes a lot of sense from what I've experienced trying to delete things of like having something that's a little bit more systematic makes it a lot easier. Um, it's also kind of good to know this is along the side of like collection scheduling. Adrian, who will be coming on board on our team in the next couple of weeks, I think it's kind of good to start bringing this up. What I'm kind of going to be pushing him to work on right when he comes in is actually going to be along having to do with scheduling or having like more fine, like trying to help y'all or figure out how this all works of more fine grained control of pretty much pushing a repository to the top of the collection queue, which I feel like is kind of all intermixed in this somewhat. So
Yeah.
we can talk about that more as it comes, but I want to keep on mentioning it. So then on the Augur maintainer side, you are thinking about how how these things might be implemented, because you will have an engineer to be working on this in a couple weeks.
Mhm.
Yeah, so maybe I've been thinking, this is just an aside, but I've been thinking, this has been in the back of my mind for a while, doing like a podcast or a Zoom cast with Andrew and Isaac and John and I think especially Andrew, to describe the job scheduler as it currently exists and be critical of it, because I think there's both usefulness in understanding what's there and what's been there in the past. And I also think that job scheduling is one of these entertainingly permanent problems in computer science, and the solutions are inevitably hilarious when you look at them in hindsight. So I mean, I think there's some really good ideas that we implemented, and I also think um, there's some things that end up being kind of hilarious as Augur goes forward and ages and gets bigger instance by instance. There's just things you might do differently. Um,
You're having similar conversations right now with Eight Knot, of kind of the exact same thing of like looking at the scheduling and the way that we've handled jobs in the past and some things that we definitely would do differently now, but that's the nature of it. So it's kind of a funny thing that, yep, technical debt is real.
Yeah. Well, and I think this scheduling problem is this, it's like
Yeah.
it's a fixture in all things computing. Eventually you run into it and then you run into it again and again. And it's like for me, it's been the one recurrent problem across all of my professional experience has been job scheduling.
It is kind of funny. We've had a lot of conversations about the key orchestrator in Augur and how it solved a lot of problems for us all at once to just have a dedicated process whose only job is to do one singular thing, and that is to hand out keys. And um, I remember one time Andrew sort of independently brought up, why don't we do that for like this? And why don't we do that for this? And um, so we are actually considering outside of like collection specifically using a lot more independent single process workers whose job is sort of to own a particular area of Augur's operation. Um, Instead of relying on the collection scheduler to do those things, which is what we currently do for a couple things that I don't think is necessarily the best idea. So there's a lot of stuff that we currently have under consideration for improving not only the administrability of an Augur instance, but also the I wouldn't say necessarily reliability, but more so the
Pretty,
tractability.
yeah, pretty, with understanding how the machine is working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are great conversations to be having right now. Is like, I mean, this is going to be kind of a new phase of having a pretty much a full-time engineer dedicated to working on stuff. Like most of his stuff is going to be working on Augur, at least for the like near term foreseeable future. So
And
some
when
of
does he
these bigger
start again?
end of this month, so the week
Okay,
of Open Source Summit in North America,
perfect. Will he
which is
be will
great.
he be there?
He won't be there. He'll like,
Or
which is it works out. He'll there's to do corporate things.
orientation?
Yeah, there's lots of corporate things that I'm sure he'll be doing that
Oh
week. I'm
yeah.
not too worried about it, but yeah, like these more like major overhauls whenever it's like the maintainer team as it is now coming up with like what the structure is of that, and like that's one like that does take a certain amount of time, but thinking about that implementation and who's going about spending the time implementing and testing it, that responsibility doesn't have to solely lay on y'all anymore. um, so
That is very, very good news. Okay, let's see. Anything, what else is on the agenda? Okay,
I have a
think we've,
question, and I think that the
yeah.
answer is going to be no, but I want to ask the very least. For context, for others that are not me and Sean, we identified a bug with the OpenSSF scorecard. I'll let Sean kind of describe what was actually happening because I'm kind of curious in the solution. But what I wanted to ask is if there was any way of like at this point, none of our repositories have either like that data there or really old of it. Is there a way of refreshing that table of like making where that table collects on all repositories, or if it's just gonna have to like wait for the scheduler to do its thing and get around to all of them?
So the short answer is wait for the scheduler to
Yeah.
do its thing. Um, because I'm not even sure, let's see, I'm just verifying. I believe it's under facade that gets executed, but I'm checking.
Because there's like a facade worker and then there's a secondary worker that both touch
Okay,
it.
yes, it's the pro, I think it's I know that process dependency metrics is under facade. I see that. And that's the one that calls the OpenSSF scorecard and stores that data. And
What does the secondary task then do?
let me check. Secondary. Oh, well, maybe I'm wrong about that.
There's
Um,
yeah, there's two of, and so I could see just like understanding to my understand I guess to my understanding it makes sense why there's like a facade portion of it. I don't know what the yeah, I don't know what the secondary of like how it yeah, how each one interact.
Yeah, I have to look into that because the actual the class for processing dependency metrics, not libyear, but just dependency metrics and OpenSSF, those classes are in the same core process file. So I was I just assumed they were executed together, but now it looks as though perhaps they're not. And so I have to dig into the code to see for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually reopen that issue until we can like we know that it's like that the fix
Yeah,
is
yeah.
in and that it works.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I know the fix is in and working.
Oh, have you seen the data populate for repositories?
Yes, I
Oh, great.
have. I didn't release it until I'd seen that. And in addition to the fix, which was really, I think, a change to the underlying Go libraries that OpenSSF uses. There's a switch for repo and local, and at one point we had to switch it to local because we're counting off of local repositories. And it appears that at some point that the logic switched back to what it originally was, which was that you put in dash dash repo. And so I switched it back to that. That made it work. And then while I was in there dealing with this, I added the feature that we've discussed before, where we keep all of the history for running OpenSSF so that, effectively you'll get a new record every time it runs against a repo. So over time you can observe and analyze the evolution of its OpenSSF scorecard scores. Um, a fair warning, they add line items to the score all the time. They seldom remove them though, so you'll have pretty consistent data for the things that exist throughout all of time, and then you'll have new things popping up
Yeah, that's fine.
periodically.
That works.
Yeah,
Great.
that's
That's
just how
awesome.
they do this. That's just how they do the scorecard. They think of something, they add it periodically.
That's great. I was actually just thinking about that implement. I was like, oh, I'll wait to bring that up until we've gotten the fix in and good to go. So that's great that you're able to kind of handle it all
Yeah,
together. I'm now just like distracted because I'm like, what is the difference between the facade and the secondary worker?
I am only because I'm facilitating the call. Am I not already off in code, like multitasking here? It's just harder to multitask when you're facilitating. Um,
Yeah, because yeah, the secondary is the process. I guess maybe it's like the it's process open SSF dependency metrics is the secondary task.
yeah,
And I don't know
and
if
then
the facade is
it's
the
process dependency metrics. That's process dependency metrics. The code for executing that is in the same file as the code for OpenSSF. That's why it's a little odd to me, but we probably had a reason for actually dividing where they are executed. I just need to make sure that's actually what's happening.
yeah,
Um,
cool. Sweet. The
um,
only other
any,
things that
oh, go
I
ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, and I don't really know if there's anything to be done. To keep, I know we keep on bringing up the new, like looking at collection on different Git sources. Um, just kind of bringing that back up of something that I would like to try and see what happens. Um,
Yeah. Like I know we have, like I know we handle GitLab as we've discussed. I think you're asking about repositories that have no platform associated with them, right?
I guess on the GitLab side of it, which I still want Kai, I don't think Kai was on this call, but so Kai is supposed to be doing an audit of that. There's like I think there's some things that need to be looked at from like the GitLab side because while the functionality is technically there, I think a lot of it isn't. There's something off. Like with commits and issues where I'm seeing certain things where data isn't being collected and I'm not really sure why. So GitLab is its own thing.
phenomena. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that and I would probably fall under as well. I would assume it's going to be falling under things that Adrian will be going at earlier. And this is
If you have some GitLab repositories, like a dozen or so that you care about a lot and watch, maybe I could add those to the testing database that we use. I don't think that we have enough examples of GitLab repositories that we know that people care about and maintain. Um, and so that would probably help us
yeah.
have sufficient data or the right data to see issues that you're seeing perhaps before you see them, like we do much of the time with GitLab or GitHub rather. Yeah.
Yep. I sent a image in the Augur 8 knot. I can't
Slack.
confirm that those are things that we like deeply care about. I just know that they are active, and those are the ones that I've kind of have been keeping in the background because I could see the no issue, like all of them have 0 issues, I think it is, and that was like, okay, these were things that I wanted to tackle and look at because I know that they're like active um, GitLab. Uh,
Okay. Now, this is good. This is helpful. I know I have Inkscape in there. Um,
Then I put the wait, where did I put it in chat was the issue like just like the general like off-platform commit processing for and this one is like a it's hosted by cgit.
and have you tried, I just forgive me for asking a question I'm sure I have already. Have you tried just putting it in and collecting on it?
No. If you
Okay.
I've made me I can. I just didn't want to.
No, I mean, I know that we handled this at one time. I'm suspecting we don't right now. But I can find out pretty quickly. All right. So like not quickly, like on the call, but like
Yes.
I'll throw it just to be clear about that. I'll throw it in our repo or in our test instance along with some of these GitLab ones.
Yes. And I'll kind of say a little bit of an up. I know we have like a lot of issues that we've been kind of talking on about. I'm just moving over to the ones that I would like. But about the contributor table collision.
Yeah, that
And
yeah,
so one thing I was going to say is that I'm starting to see more like, which makes sense from what everything that we've been talking about. It's slowly kind of working itself out. I do want to kind of do the hash stuff. I think there like it shouldn't need, but like as there's less um, large repositories being collected on for like events, collect events, it's some of them are completing that weren't able to before. So I think it just what I'm trying to say is that it's getting better, but it doesn't change that I think there's like some like hashing some things that should be implemented on like our instance. Maybe the discussion is of like capping out the amount of like collect events that can be running at the same time. Maybe that's like
yeah,
something that should be discussed, but more that everything that I'm seeing matches what I've seen in like what people are like identifying as potential causes, like behavior wise. It's getting better, but still think there's like intervention at the very least on our instance that's needed. But logically, everything is checking out.
okay,
Kind of.
good. John raised his hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
John,
yes. So we did talk about this issue specifically at our last meeting.
which was yesterday.
Yes, we met on Sunday because one of the maintainers is going to be out for 2 weeks, and so we wanted to get some stuff talked out before that. And the there one of these tasks we found has a very well, not it doesn't have a very large batch size. It has an uncapped batch size, which means that I believe it's the collect events task, which will attempt to submit an essentially unlimited number of changes all at the same time. And so the discussion we had was switching it to use a batch model to try submitting much smaller sequences of changes at a time.
We
Like,
do this in other places.
Yeah.
yeah, especially for the contributors table for this exact reason. And so even for very, very significantly large repos, we are expecting to be able to reduce the chances of a deadlock happening in the future. Andrew is going to be probably primarily the one working on that. But eventually we will have a fix pushed to release that will make it a lot less likely for this particular kind of deadlock to happen.
Sweet. Yeah, that all sounds good to me. I feel like that will probably make a pretty big difference. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I do think the contributors table is like so permanently used on every collection process to ensure we have a contributor for the thing that I do think, regardless of what we do at the application level, for some scale of Augur repository that is less than the scale you're at, we need to do some kind of optimization at the database level. That like hash partitioning, I think, is probably enough. But I also know that you have Josh Burkus on your team, and he will know things
Yeah.
about Postgres that I've never even heard of.
He will, but he also is like not like he's in the weeds of it in a very he's in the weeds of the our primary to replica side of things. He does not look
Yeah,
at like he's like whenever he's like I don't have a lot of gauge on this. Like he's not like he's looking at flower and looking at collection usually and
yeah,
how things usually goes that I'm relaying to him what I'm seeing on the collection side because this is separate from like Augur the project, but
yeah,
we're having issues with our replica being able to keep up with our primary um with whenever people are hitting the replica pretty hard.
yeah.
And so that's the stuff that
He's
uh
working on, yeah. No, I appreciate knowing that. And it's kind of almost what I assumed. I think I've had a couple experiences because Josh does know so much where I feel like he's giving the equivalent of like, well, why don't you hit the turbo button? Because like
oh yeah.
there's like something about Postgres that like all the Postgres people know, but I haven't run across yet, and it will fix a bunch of stuff. So I always like waiting for Josh to say the version, some equivalent of hit the turbo switch, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, and this kind of remind there's an issue also about adding an index. You said if there's any other ones, I'll answer this and the issue as well. There probably is. I'll
Yeah,
let
but
you
yeah,
know.
but
I'll
it
open
hasn't
another
become a
ticket.
problem yet. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
but
fair
that's
enough.
the pull request files. I guess the two tables that I see a lot of issues with querying against is pull request files and pull request reviews, which both make sense and to an extent are just going to probably be kind of slow. Um,
But
but
if you have the
making sure
repo ID
there's
indexed, it'll be a lot faster because that is the pivotal key.
I guess
Um,
that's gonna be it's a good point. I'll put that on there. I don't know if there's already an index on pull request reviews for repo ID. If not, we should definitely add it. So I will mention that in the chat, but I just don't know.
yeah, I think part of I think I also did not understand that Postgres did not create indexes for foreign keys. I think, and I don't remember what database I used in the past, but I suspect it was Oracle that does that. And I probably falsely assumed that those indices were already being created because they're foreign keys. But in fact, I looked and Postgres does not automatically create indexes on foreign keys.
So that's an assumption that you've made up until this point.
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know. Just so okay, I'll I'm usually the one that's like hitting this stuff the most, and so I'll keep that in mind as I'm querying, and will continue to put new things on it. So that means that that's probably it could be if pull request review doesn't have a index on repo ID, we should definitely add it. Honestly, any of the repository, any of the tables. This is for me personally. Any of the
Yeah.
tables that doesn't have a and like I guess I could put that, like any of the tables that doesn't have an index on pull request ID.
Yeah. Well, it's not Oracle. Oracle doesn't automatic. Some bits, obviously some database I've used at some point in the last decades uh did that, or I made me assume that, or maybe I've just been assuming something wrong for decades myself. I don't know. But yeah, I think going through an indexing repo ID where it exists, it's an integer. It's not likely to really hurt anything in terms of performance on inserts. It would be nominal. Um,
Yeah,
I
because
think.
I mean, I think that probably what, like 99+% of the queries, at least the ones that I do, are
A
going to
repo
be,
ID, yeah,
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 repo ID
yeah,
is a field. So I think it's like
100%.
reasonable to think that pretty much every
Yeah,
single query done is going to be based off of the repo ID.
yep, yeah. I will. I think I'm probably just going to ask ChatGPT to ingest my schema and suggest where to index repo ID.
The
Maybe
I
not
do have,
quite that aggressively stupid, but
yeah, I mean, it's always kind of interesting with like the AI tools, like where it's helpful the most. Helping with query generation, obviously you don't want to do anything like delete based off of it that you don't
no,
like, but
no,
like it does help some of the tedious tasks out a lot.
it
Um,
does.
because you
Finding
can start
like
there and then it's
stack
easy.
traces.
So good.
My getting to root cause is like 10% of the time it used to take me on Augur stuff. That's
Yeah.
like 90% of what I use ChatGPT for is Augur error messages. So I can
Data
figure out,
pre-processing is crazy. It's so helpful.
yeah,
Very nice that you can kind of move. But yeah, that all sounds good. I just edited that issue to pretty much change to being look at the indexes for all the main tables for repo ID.
yeah. All right, that sounds good. Anything else anyone wants to bring up today? All right, well, thank you, John, Alekia, John, Callie.
I
I
think.
will see y'all in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.